Hello, this is George Sandmann. I'm the founder and CEO of Growth Drive. And Growth Drive is a system used by business advisors to drive client profits, growth, and value. Now, we're also a community. Every week we get together to talk about all things business advisor, everything clients, cases, things we're seeing out in the world. Now, tune in here to this podcast, and you can join the conversation by scanning this QR code, passcode 867-5309. Jump into the conversation. Everyone's welcome. We're looking forward to having you. So here we go. On with the show. Hey, good morning, Joseph. How are you? Let me see here.
Good morning, George. How's it going?
Good, man. How's life treating you?
Oh, life is always good, but
Good.
never quiet.
I think you and I could sit down and discuss that, and probably maybe for different reasons, but you're right. Never quiet.
Yeah, never quiet. But
Did you
as it,
go ahead?
no, I was just going to say that as long as you feel like you're productive and moving forward, so then I guess it's a good thing, right?
That's 100%. I couldn't be more excited about what's going on in the market, what's going on in the community, the things that we're going to be putting in your hands going forward. A lot of noise out there that I think creates an opportunity for us. So, yeah.
No doubt. No doubt.
In fact, I think you would probably be in, if we had a non-public conversation, we'd probably be in even more agreement than you probably would be publicly. Yeah, it's an interesting.
I could say it publicly. I don't have a problem. I mean, there's a lot of noise out there. I think there's a tremendous amount of confusion.
Yes.
People don't really know what is true, what is not true, anymore. I mean, AI is not helping, obviously.
No, AI is not helping, and I'm going to be fascinated to see, Joseph. I'm sorry. Finish your point. I apologize. Didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that was my point. AI is not helping the vast majority of people. Helps people like us as practitioners, but it's not helping the target avatar. It's just confusing them because they don't know what to believe anymore.
Yeah. Yes. And it's going to be interesting. What's going to be interesting is, we know that EOS is analog, right? And we know that EOS makes tools, makes knowledge available. So there's a similarity to AI. And then there's a book, there's a methodology, there are free tools. There's a lot of great stuff you can do. There's also an army of implementers out there, right? And there's a reason that CEOs hire implementers. And I believe if you think that through, our business model as business advisors remains exactly as it was. You make a fabulous point about AI creating confusion. I don't think that guys, if we look at Good Morning, Eric, Good Morning, Steve, if we look at guys in our demographic who are running businesses, to what extent, this is a legitimate question, right? To what extent are they suddenly going to stop running the business the way they always have and suddenly pivot and have AI run the business for them, right? Or make decisions for them. And
Yeah. I see two things in this, two interesting points here. One, I think there was already confusion in the marketplace before AI, and that confusion was in lots of people hanging their shingle out saying they're consultants and they're not, right? So I think AI is just another confusion in the marketplace. I don't disagree, and I caught the end of the point, but I don't disagree that AI adds to the confusion, but I don't think AI started the confusion, in my humble opinion.
Interesting. Yeah.
Right. The other thing I see is that I think we confuse knowledge and wisdom when we're talking about AI.
Yeah, we talked about this last week.
Yeah, right. But I don't think Joseph was here, and I think it goes to the point. What we need to be doing as, if you will, the keepers of wisdom, is reminding people the value of wisdom versus knowledge and helping people understand that, at least to the extent that I've seen it, I'd love somebody to show me something different, but all all it does really well is aggregate knowledge a lot better than Google did. It gathers knowledge and brings it together a lot and puts a lot of knowledge summarized in front of you, but it doesn't apply any of that knowledge in a unique and creative way. It tells you, it goes through the list of 20 things and tells you the best one to pick based on these selections. That's just knowledge. That's that's diagnosing in the doctor's. But how do you treat somebody when you don't have all the right things, or when there's something that nobody's ever seen before?
Look, I think that, at the end of the day, what we do and what we do best is really compile information in such a way that allows business owners to make better decisions. That's really what it comes down to. I don't think we can do much more than that, in my humble opinion. The challenge with AI is, my son is actually an expert in this. He has now a whole consulting firm that's focused just on AI strategy and advisement with, with guys that put together all these tools and so on. But putting that aside, the real challenge is that unless you have what I would call a very secure source of very clean data to work with, you get a lot of very bad advice. A simple example is if you use Grok, for example, to do some research and to come back with some results. Well, they're checking Twitter feeds and they're looking at what the consensus is from the Twitter feed. So if the average person on Twitter says the best thing, since sliced bread is, ham and cheese, that's going to be the result, right? This whole concept between Gen AI and non-Gen AI is not insignificant. So a lot of people are relying on AI to provide answers that is going to mislead and confuse a lot of people, even people, for example, in our, not necessarily the growth drive community, but in the consulting community, a lot of them are using it for marketing, using it for compiling decks and all kinds of things that is not based on what I would call reliable information and data. And all it's going to do is propagate even more bad information out in the public. So to the extent that, our clients or prospects want to get good advice, it's going to make it more difficult for them. Because at the end of the day, they're going to, just like you, probably go to ChatGPT and say, give me information about this, and it's going to come up, and you're going to have perhaps what you present, which is data-driven through Growth Drive or some other tool, compared to what they're pulling up on ChatGPT, and potentially make for more difficult situations. That's why you have to be very laser focused in terms of what it is that you are delivering to your client.
I'll just throw out another key point about AI. AI is designed to please you. It's not designed to provide you with an accurate answer. That's a true fact. So
you can handle that with a prompt, Steve. You can tell it, I don't want you to be agreeable. I want you to be, combative and make me prove all of my points and support it with research data. You can put that in a prompt.
I want you to be that guy.
well,
Yes.
just to humor myself, I often put in my prompt, and don't just humor me.
Right.
But seriously, the point you raise is that if you prompt it accurately, then you're probably going to get good results. But if you don't,
better results.
It truly is designed to please you as opposed to give you accurate information.
That's why the larger firms are going to have a much better advantage leveraging off of AI, because they've got good data and good systems to capture the data. And therefore they get the benefit of what AI can actually do with data. Smaller business, smaller companies that are out there using all these apps left, right, and center to be able to do work for them. It's not going to be too productive. I forget who it was last week that was doing the Gamma app, right? For putting together a presentation. And one of his frustrations was it took him 2 weeks to make all the modifications from something that was supposed to have done it for him very quickly, which my sense is probably going to be for the vast majority of people, the vast majority of applications, unless it's, hyper specific and you spent real time making sure that workflow and the apps you're working are going to produce exactly the type of results that you want, which again is another investment of time and effort.
Yeah.
Well,
So I just throw out Sorry, George, go ahead.
No, please, Eric.
I just throw out, an example that comes to mind. What data, what AI function would have prompted Steve Jobs to go out and create the iPod?
They would have told him not to.
Yeah, there's no data that says, boy, everybody's liking carrying around their entire collection of LP records, or they love carrying around the suitcase that I used to have of all my cassette tapes. There's that data that didn't exist. My point is simply, I think AI is great, and I agree with your point, Joseph. The people who have better data are going to get better results because AI is just another flavor of data accumulation and extraction of trends out of data. But it doesn't connect the person who's reading Romeo and Juliet and who comes up with this business idea out of it. It doesn't do that. Right? It doesn't do the innovation part that I think we are more than just knowledge gatherers as consultants. I think we apply wisdom, not only of our experience. We've done this before, which that could come out of a book, and AI could read that book and say, here's what happened. But we're able to take something that we learned over here and apply it over here in a totally different circumstance. That's the part I just don't see AI doing yet.
Well, and imagine having the growth conversation with a chat bot, right? And imagine that experience right? And imagine then the difference, the same exact questions in a one-on-one with a human who cares.
Yeah.
That's where I think we tend to focus on what AI can do, and it can do some believe me. Listen, we have the framework.
It's a great tool.
And we have the framework for the how we are bringing AI to you to make you more efficient and to maybe give you some insights. But to Joseph's, I mean, there's so many great points. To Joseph's point, the quality of the data. And the discipline of the AI so quality data, good discipline, good design. But at the end of the day, I continue to believe, and I'll get back to the EOS, get a copy of Traction and do the VTO. That's one experience. Hire an implementer. And in fact, maybe that's a good segue into what I heard last week in San Diego. Hire a good implementer, or better, a business advisor, because an implementer doesn't do what we do, right? An implementer can say, well, what do you think? Which is a great question. What do you see? Hey, team, the implementer does all the navel gazing, leads all the navel gazing. I mean, that's good, but they're not you. They are humans. And I don't see AI taking that model away, right? Go ahead, Joseph.
Yeah, I would say AI is not going to come up with the Reese's peanut butter cup. We know that.
Yeah.
But right, we know that. But I would say, for example, we have to be careful because I can't remember if it was IBM or Microsoft. One of them just recently noted that they laid off like 6,500 staff in HR, and they replaced it with an AI bot. And not only the things are getting done faster, but satisfaction went up from 24% or 25% up to like 80%. In terms of, the HR work. So you really need to focus in terms of what it is that AI really does best, which is the menial tasks, the things that are time consuming that nobody likes to do. But when you're having a conversation with a client, it's rarely about just the data. It's, his feelings, what he's thinking about, what his emotions he's going through. AI is going to have a very hard time processing any of that.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, and Joseph, I think the parallel of what AI does, and this goes back to what at least the part I heard of the conversation I jumped into in the middle, AI does massive data well, right? If it has good data, to your point, if you want to diagnose something really, really arcane, and whether that's in medicine or something else, and it can read all the data about it and say, yeah, that's true, but only in these circumstances, it can get to that really precise thing better than humans can, because it can precisely read data and precisely repeat that data back to us, right? So as a tool, it's great. It's like having the calculator instead of having to do the calculation all by hand, right? We're going to make mistakes. The calculator just doesn't make mistakes when it adds or multiplies or divides the numbers. It's the entry of the numbers that is the mistakes that we make, right? So it's a great, great calculator. The point is, and I think we've all made it now, the parts that it can't do, and that's where we need to focus.
Right. It doesn't provide the correct data, and it doesn't do web scraping. I'll give you a very specific example because I just did it with my son. We were looking at all the different AI-based accounting and financial apps. So the real problem, the challenge is that it'll take all the information that you have and get you a result really fast, but it doesn't mean that the result is of any value because of the underlying data has been booked or entered wrong. It's still garbage in, garbage out. It's not
right. We all had to learn how to do math in second grade so that we could tell if the calculator was actually giving us a right answer or not.
Correct. And for the vast majority of companies that we deal with, their financials are generally, when we start, at least when we start, perhaps not once we're engaged, the vast majority of them are terrible. They're inaccurate. They're incomplete, and definitely not what I would call investor ready. So, if you just layer AI on top of that and you're extracting that data, it's not going to be particularly helpful. But again,
I'd love
the
to
whole point is that it confuses, the public.
Yeah, what AI would be awesome at is take this data and lay out an analysis that I can review, that I can pick out where the problems are, right? Show me it in 5 different ways so I can look at it with a vertical analysis, with a horizontal analysis. Give me some data with the proper calculation of the percentage of the KPIs that I want against it. And now I can look through it and say, this doesn't look right. Is it not look right because the data's wrong? Or does it not look right because there's a problem there? Right?
With a good base of data to compare it with. Again, it comes back to the same thing, right?
Yeah. No. I'm saying you start with the AI just laying out the data in meaningful ways. The deciding comes here. The looking at it saying that doesn't look right. The judgment part comes from knowing, oh, that's right. They said in 2023 they had this incident going, and that's why the debt to equity ratio is up. And yet I don't see this on there, right? That's the part that you got to reason through.
And
You got to feed all that data back into AI in a meaningful way that it can pull it out.
well, and imagine AI saying, Joseph, to your excellent point, because imagine AI saying, hey, a glance through your big 3 reports indicates the following. You should be asking at a minimum, you should be asking the following questions, because it could do that looking at specific documents with the right prompt very, very efficiently. And imagine it saying, okay, well, now I'm going to look at, let's take 1,000 manufacturing companies for which we have data inside Clarity, anonymized, right? 100% anonymized. It's in our terms of use. Nobody freak out. We're not going to give specific data on any specific company. But imagine it looking at 1,000 manufacturing companies and saying, hey, here are the following ideas, conclusions. Other people have tried that and it didn't go well, or they maybe you ought to try this. That's where AI can be brilliant, but still, Eric, to your point, it has to come back, and it only does a first draft. And I think, to the point that we all agree with, and I think that EOS would, and scaling up, and all of these organizations and CPAs who we should talk about, you need to sit down with a person, because my phone can buzz and tell me that it's time to do blank, and I can so easily ignore the heck out of it. But if Sydney says, hey, did you go to the grocery store, even though my phone buzzed and said, reminder, you have to swing by the store on your way home. It's Sydney saying, did you swing by the store, or are you swinging by the store, that really makes me take action. I'm oversimplifying, but taking action is a human being accountable between humans, I think we're more accountable to each other as humans than we will ever be to a machine. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
Okay, I'm going to jump in here. I've been listening, had a couple things to add. One is owner dependency, over dependency on the owner. We're trying to solve for that, correct? And I'm reminded at an owner meeting the other day, and he's talking to a second lieutenant and saying that he just doesn't want the organization to make the same mistakes he's made. Right? So as we look at the AI, does that give us some sort of history around mistakes that have happened in the past and therefore make predictable future, which then would release the owner from the dependency standpoint to educate his second lieutenants on, at least you're not making the mistakes I made. I mean, if you're
But to
not
what
making
extent, Joe?
mistakes,
Yeah, your point's a good one, man. But to what extent is a business owner? Think about if I have 100 business owners, how many of that 100 are going to sua sponte of their own, spontaneously, sorry, do that because their phone told them to do it, or their laptop, or whatever, because AI told them to, versus how many are going to get pressured by Steve, because that's ultimately what we do, or incented or educated to get with their team and get this stuff off their desk, because it's much easier to be like, you know, God bless it, it's easier for me to do this myself. And to continue, how many books have been written on this exact topic? And I think that there are probably 5 out of those 100 who are going to actually.
usually what happens, my experience being a Vistage for 20 years, is that it's a peer, you're validating your assumptions through peer engagement. And so that, and many times the person is in Vistage because they're among other people that have gotten further with their business than they have. And so, they kind of have the tea leaves figured out, at least to the point where they are today. Maybe not tomorrow, but so that validation, wherever we get it, and AI is a tool, right? You guys are all correct in saying that. And yet lack of that data surge and actually diluting it down to the essence is what's really frozen a lot of people in decision making, because they just got too much data. So the advent of the data collection, and you're all right. I mean, it's all about the prompt, right? And yet that is allowing executives to move forward with at least their gut check, right? Because they're all going to make, within the world that we live in, and I'm talking about the non-public, business community, those decisions are for the most part made kind of at a gut check level and then validated with, like your wife does with buying something, it's like, well, validate it with the sale price, right? So what is that we can encourage them to gut check with, and let other people learn how to do those gut checks and increase their senior leadership team, because they're woefully underdeveloped. And oftentimes it's the Rubik's Cube effect, where they just keep on taking the Rubik's Cube away from the employee, solving it, and then handing it back.
Yeah.
So
What you're describing, Joe, is the difference between a business owner and a CEO. And business owners can operate by gut, and they plateau.
Yeah.
And I think we will all violently agree with that, because they get to their capabilities, to their level,
Yeah.
and they plateau, and they may
They
continue.
can't get their arms around the tree anymore.
A
Yep.
CEO is a different animal, and that's who we want. That's who's qualified. A CEO who's like, you know what? I need to use data, outside advice. My job is to maximize shareholder value. To do that, I need to X, Y, and Z, and I need to get out of my own bloody way. That's why those are the guys I refer to, who are maybe 5 of that 100 who spontaneously. Now we can educate another chunk of them, and then there are those who are recidivists, right? They're not going to.
Yeah.
They're not going to change. And at the end of the day, that's a separate conversation.
Yeah.
But Joe, I think you make a good point. But that's
Yeah.
the difference between being a peer to a CEO, which is what we do, and coaching a business owner.
Yeah. And Joe and George and Joseph, I think there's maybe I didn't catch this point in yours, Joseph, but I don't mean to attribute it to you, but I was thinking when I was listening to Joe, there's another point in here, and that is the Facebook effect. And maybe this was the point you were trying to make, Joseph, is with AI out there and giving bad information, after a while, Facebook has been able to get people to do things or believe things by repeating over and over through their messaging platform. These are the facts, right? And psychologically, we fall prey to that sort of thing. And if the point you were making, Joseph, is that can happen with AI also, because we don't think about the assumptions that are in things, much like a lot of people who read studies in the paper or in a magazine, 4 out of 5 dentists recommend this. Well, like, how many dentists did you study? And did you only talk to 5 dentists, right? And like all the things that are built into that, if we're not thinking about those things, then AI can change our mind in a wrong way, because we're not critically thinking about what's happening. We're not thinking about how the calculator came up with the answer enough to say that can't be right, or I want to understand more before I'm going to believe in that. If that's what you were saying.
That's exactly correct. That's exactly the point. And I'm going to give you a very specific example. I asked Grok to do some deep search in that function. And I asked to make sure when it gave me the report to give me all the citations. And I went through the citations, and about 50% of them actually misrepresented the citation.
Yeah.
You know,
Sorry to laugh.
We think it's funny. We think it's funny, but it's not.
How many of you have read an article with a citation of a statistical thing and they're misquoting the statistical representation of the study or whatever,
Correct.
right? Like all the time, right?
Correct. So you still have to go through that process. What at least it does do is compiles perhaps a lot of information that you can actually start narrowing down to do the work that you need to do. But I'm just saying, we all of us and our clients have to be careful in terms of, how they're using and implementing AI. But your point, Eric, is correct, that the Facebook effect is, crowdsourcing of bad information just makes
not even crowdsourcing. It could be manipulative, right? Or
Correct.
or just ignorance, right? Just not paying attention to what is actually there, right? Like if we just believe whatever we type into the calculator is going to give us the right answer, then we're going to get what we bought into, right? Yeah, it's a great point, Joseph. I misunderstood the point at the start. I was picking at part of the point because it's a particular thing. This knowledge versus wisdom thing is on my mind a lot, because I think we think that if we have enough data, we can solve any problem. And I think, quite frankly, I think that's bullshit, right? You don't solve every problem with data. You just don't.
Yeah, what's a famous saying? You can't learn to ride a bike from reading a book.
That's exactly right.
Right. You can learn about riding a bike from I can learn a lot and understand a lot by reading books about things places I've never been to and doing things. That doesn't mean it's the same as having been there.
And we also have to remember who's a qualified client, and if you have a client who's using AI to run their business, God bless. And I would simply stay in touch with that person, not with, just be their friend.
Yeah.
Be their
When
friend.
you stub your toe, call me. Yeah.
Yeah. And if I can ever answer any questions and check in with them, Larry, and I'm sure you guys do the same thing. Larry talks about this, he's like, fine, don't hire me. I'm good. And I'd love to check in once a month.
Yep.
For anyone listening to this, it sounds like AI isn't worth a toot.
Oh,
That's not true.
that's not it.
But it is. I couldn't live without it today. And there are many people that couldn't live without it. Well, obviously you can live without it, but it multifolds your productivity if you treat it appropriately.
Yeah.
So it has immense value, and its value will grow over time. But like any tool, you need to learn how to use the tool before you start.
Yeah.
That is well said, Steve.
And it's
It's
not
a
a
great
trust, but
tool.
verify. It's a verify and create trust.
But it's a great tool if used for the proper things and used with understanding. Forecasting is a dangerous tool because people put assumptions into a forecast all the time, and they do all the math correctly, but they get the wrong answer.
Would
And
you
it's
like to explain
it's
that?
not the tool that's the problem. It's the assumptions that went into it that are the problem, right? But they don't think about that. They're thinking about the tool. They're focused on the tool and they're not thinking about the inputs. To Joseph's brilliant point, we got to be thinking about all the parts. And once I thought about the magazine article and the quoting a study, that's what made it click for me, Joseph. Thank you. Like that, I get it. I get it. It's the assumptions.
Yeah. It's an interesting
To
time.
turn this conversation around, what are some of the best things you're using AI for right now? Let's talk about the positives of AI. To Steve's point, what are some of the things that you are using AI for and it's been really effective for you?
And at this point in the conversation, I would like to make a shameless plug for the Growth Drive community. Please, if you have a prompt that is very helpful, put it into we have an AI section in the community.
Yeah.
And we're going to try
Awesome
to get
idea.
more muscular about
Yeah.
putting those prompts in there. So sorry, go ahead.
No. This is a discussion, wherever it wants to go. Steve, what are you using it for? You said that you couldn't live without it. Where are you finding it really useful in your practice? If you could share.
Yeah, I certainly can. Let me give you a little anecdote that doesn't exactly answer your question. I saw a guy that was trying to sell his services, and he created a YouTube video describing his services. And he said, and if you're interested in this, click down below to set up a meeting, blah, blah, blah. So I took an AI tool and applied it to the YouTube video and got the transcript, put the transcript into ChatGPT and gave it an appropriate prompt to get the essence of what he was selling. And I now have the essence of what it's selling in a ChatGPT prompt. But the more broad answer to your question is I treat it like you guys. I mean, if prompted appropriately, AI is not stupid. It may tell you the wrong stuff, and there's ways to guard against that. But I sit down and have a discussion with it. And so
it's the discussion part.
Brainstorming.
Yeah.
It's a great point.
And oh, by the way, it writes a hell of a lot faster than I do.
Yeah.
Look, what I can do is I can share with you what my son is doing, and for the most part, aside from what we call a practical AI readiness. In other words, this is first like an assessment, if you want to call it, just to see whether or not any company is even ready to do any type of deployment on AI. But for the most part, for companies that already have processes in place and they have some basic framework for data. So then what it does is actually just accelerates that process. And then it's not just the individual process, but for example, let's assume you have 20 or 30 processes in finance, and each one is being done by, let's call it a different module or a different employee as opposed to a module. So it'll actually be able to take a look at those processes and see if there's a way to integrate them and to make it faster and have a better single source of truth for the data to be pulled from. So it makes good processes much, much more efficient. And in terms of finance, in terms of marketing, it's also very helpful. It's also very helpful in operations. It's very good for customer service and customer support, capturing the information, being able to extract. But you have to be able, like as Steve said, you have to have the really good prompts, and those prompts have to be constantly tested and improved. So you may get some huge uplift in terms of integrating all of these different processes and systems together, but it still requires someone to constantly work on it to make it more and more improved. The one caveat is, for a simple example where people can get caught with AI, and that's what really requires someone who's got enough investment to do it properly. I forget which one, but ChatGPT had, ChatGPT 4, was running, and now number 4 is not available. And it was very good for a specific type of application. So if you build prompts that were working in ChatGPT 4, and now ChatGPT 4.0 is there, or 4 mini is there, and they don't work the same, so those prompts no longer work the same way. So, it works really well for larger companies that can build their own LLMs, have, very clear, good data and very clear processes in place. It can help them accelerate and do it much more efficiently.
It's that clarity.
The best application.
Yeah. Sorry.
I'll say another thing for any listener, but of course, a best practice, if you're doing research and you've got citations and it's critical, then you don't have the ability to know for sure whether or not you're getting good information, then take it from chat and put it in Claude, put it in Meta, put it in Grok, and compare them all and do some double checking.
Yeah, it's part of the reason I like Perplexity, because it actually gives you all the citations for where it is, so you can go look at you can go where some of them, when you prompt something, it'll give you the information back, but you don't know what the source of it was. Perplexity will give you all the source data so that you can go check it.
And you can ask chat to give you, but I agree. I use Perplexity a lot. And anyone I talk to, I don't use Google search anymore, not as a matter of policy. I think I like my experience with Perplexity more. What's fascinating is AIs. I don't want to betray our technology roadmap or not reveal our technology roadmap, but I assure you that this is top of mind. And my philosophy is simple. How do I make you more effective? Help you get better insights? And it's a challenge, but how do I help you with better ideas, right? Relationships, etc. That's one question. What can I take off your plate that is manual right now, right?
Yeah.
How do we make you more effective as advisors, and how do we help you better educate your clients? Which it isn't how are we using it every day? I mean, we have a Growth Drive GPT. All of you have probably used it, dabbled in it, and it's working really pretty darn well.
George, the clients want a trusted advisor. I mean, your job is to deliver the tool, so that we can deliver the correct information, but they want someone they can trust, just to have a conversation with.
And this goes to, so I had drinks yesterday with Beth LaGuardia, who's the CMO at Forbes Books. Happens to be a good friend. And we didn't talk much shop, but we talked for a little while about authority, right? And they are rebranding themselves as the authority company. Joseph, your point is the absolute right one. You can tell now pretty much once you've read a bunch, you can tell what article was written with AI and what article was written by a human and rewritten by a human and then written by a human again, right? Edited down so that it was tight and made sense. And how do we promote our authority in a way that helps a business owner understand that we can be trusted, frankly, with their future? Not to get dramatic, but that we can be trusted and we can sit down and have a conversation that won't be incredibly self-serving for us, that we care more about them and their intent and they're reaching their intent than we do about anything else in that conversation.
Yeah, I think, George, to your point, we got to be careful. If we're going out saying ChatGPT or any other source of AI is garbage, you need to hire an advisor, they're going to look at us and say, well, I get value out of AI. So that sounds really self-serving. You're just saying that so that I'll hire you. I think we got to come with the right perspective and the right messaging. And I think, Steve, your point was absolutely correct. I was trying to say the same thing. It's not that ChatGPT or any other piece of AI is bad. It's not. They're great tools. They're great tools that, if used properly in the right timing and with the right controls on them, are fantastic things. ERP systems are great tools. If you use them improperly, you'll get the wrong answer and you'll make bad decisions in your business, right? So any tool that we use in business can be used the right way or the wrong way, and it can do great things or it can foobar the whole situation. Right. So you gotta look at it in perspective as to what it is. It's a great tool and used properly. It's a great thing for people. It will not replace the human elements of an advisor and being able to relate to people. And there are other parts, I would argue, the wisdom part, the actual application of knowledge in a unique and innovative way that ChatGPT or any other AI can't really do yet. It can't take some piece, it can't connect the dots between the 3 different books I'm reading and go, here's a new creative idea. I haven't seen that yet. Again,
I don't think the world is ready to have a relationship with a chatbot. I think
Yeah,
people just
for
need
sure.
to see people and have a conversation over a drink, a cup of coffee, something, something to schmooze
Guys, heck
Yeah.
yes.
with.
That's the people part, right? And
For those who are listening out there, that's not because we're self-congratulatory and we think we're the best. That is simply human nature. I mean, this is
how we're made.
we're people.
I want to dissent.
Actually,
I want to dissent, just raise another point.
Yeah, please.
So on websites, people have become very comfortable talking to a chatbot, certainly a bright one, not a dumb one, but a bright one.
Yeah.
And it has been shown in many studies that they're more effective than humans. So it all depends upon your application, and keep the.
I would say to you that in terms of data gathering, that it's very effective and much more effective perhaps than the ability for someone like us to deliver the information. And it is true that most clients, what they do is they go out and they research and they look at information and perhaps, like you say, use chatbots to, compile information. But that sales call, that transaction where they actually say yes, that's going to be a face-to-face transaction, unless it's a very, small dollar amount, like or they're buying a widget or a bolt or something like that. But if they're doing the type of transaction for the advisory work that we're doing, that's not happening without a face-to-face call.
Yeah, you're right, Joe. And I wasn't suggesting that aspect was going to be replaced, but I'm like, well, let me segue to it. So I read another article yesterday, and it was by the CEO of one of the larger humanoid developers, and he's coming along pretty well with his factory, and there'll be a bunch of robots getting cranked out, and I forget the percentage, but it's huge. Think about the percentage of things in life that are repetitive actions that can be performed by a semi-intelligent robot. I mean, it's mind-boggling what is going to happen.
We saw it 50 years ago in the automotive industry, right?
Yeah.
Over the last 50 years in the automotive industry, a lot of repetitive things have been replaced with robots, but that hasn't, again, that didn't eliminate people in factories. What it did is change the role of people in factories. You still need robot maintenance, you still need robot programming, you still needed all these other things, and you still needed quality checks at the end. So the people were used in different ways. I agree with you, Steve. I think there's a lot of things that we as a society are unwilling to do anymore. I couldn't have imagined. I worked at McDonald's. My first job after my paper route, my very first job, was a job at McDonald's. I couldn't have imagined back then walking into a McDonald's and walking up to a screen to order my stuff. I would have thought, there's no way. You got to walk up to a person and talk to them, right? But now we're walking into McDonald's and ordering our stuff on a screen, right? Like, the world has changed.
But what you're not walking into is Bistro La Banque and ordering from a screen. There we're starting.
And that's a different experience.
That's a very different experience.
I think you just keep splitting we keep splitting hairs on the same item. And that is, there's a transactional component, which for pretty much everything will become commoditized, but the relationship component cannot be replaced by by a digital entity. That part still remains human.
And CPAs out there, and I'd love to talk about what I learned in San Diego because it's very, very relevant to this community. But CPAs out there, hear this. I don't care if in fact, I want you to use a robot to do my tax return because I don't think you can capture 27,000 pages of code. It's just impossible for a human to get this done.
I sure want that CPA to look at it at the end, though.
Amen, brother. And I want the CPA to do tax planning. And I want the CPA because those are where the human interfaces are, right? Yes. And we don't have time to discuss San Diego. AI was not in the room, but there are a lot of threats to the CPA industry that AI is accentuating, right? And the CPA industry, and I'm making a vast generalization, has committed a bunch of sins in the last 5 years, certainly, and 10 years, if we go back, in terms of commoditizing themselves, right? Making themselves irrelevant, or irrelevant individually, not irrelevant as a profession. But I don't care if Steve does my taxes or Joseph does. Is it done right? Do I think you're competent? Great. There are things that now, what I heard in San Diego was a gathering of the fastest growing firms. It was a forum to honor and learn from the fastest growing CPA firms. Private equity was incredibly present in the room, and that's its own fascinating conversation. And what is the impact of private equity? What do we misunderstand about private equity, about the more sophisticated private equity players? How might those assumptions become blindsides for us as advisors? Those are all questions we should be asking, because the sophistication of the private equity models that I heard play out in this conference, and I sat down, card right here, I sat down with a bunch of private equity backed, private equity backed, these people. I mean, the fastest growing firms are accessing capital to get it done, but their growth, they all talked about their organic growth, and we're getting 18% organic growth. They're getting crazy organic growth, and then they're allocating other growth to acquisitions. Fascinating, guys, super fascinating. And don't make an assumption that you understand private equity. It's a hydraulic situation, and private equity is getting very sophisticated very quickly. And AI is in the conversation, but AI was not in the room in San Diego, not in the way that we're discussing it here.
Yeah.
Increasing your reach and relevance with your clients was. And then maybe that's the tie-in as to what extent can tools like AI increase our reach and relevance with our clients.
And talk about an industry that's for the last 5 to 10 years has had trouble attracting the right number of people coming in to replace the number of people that are coming out of it, right?
100%. And capacity was the conversation, and offshoring or globalizing, all those terms thrown out.
Every owner I talk to who, has complained about my CPA firm doesn't get, can't turn around my stuff fast enough or isn't as responsive as I like them to be. Yep.
And we should ask ourselves, and by the way, the money is come to this conclusion. Your typical CPA, Eric, you're not a typical CPA. Your typical CPA, your traditional, let's say use the word traditional, right? Your traditional CPA and your business advisor are very different personalities. Those professions attract profoundly different people. So the challenge becomes, what does a firm do when they know they must deliver advisory services to compete, to grow, to survive, to defend,
to go up the value chain too?
And are they looking, and how long, ask yourself, we should be asking ourselves, how long is private equity going to say, you know what, I'm good with the partnership model. I'm good with you guys fighting over whose client is it anyhow. I'm good with your territoriality. I'm good with all of I'm highlighting the worst parts of the partnership models. It has wonderful things as well. How long is private equity going to put up with that? And that's something I've been saying for years. And the answer is they don't. From the closing of the transaction forward, private equity is saying, okay, we're going to distribute equity deeper into the organization. We're getting rid of the partnership model. Here are the things we're doing. But still, you're dealing with a bucket full of CPAs. That gives us a collaboration opportunity, potentially a fractional opportunity with firms that can't afford to hire a full-time. Now, that creates a bunch of opportunities for us. It certainly creates the opportunity for us to talk to CPAs and CPA firms about how they do, what they do, where they are not meeting their clients' needs. Because I really admire Richard Kopelman, who's running Aprio, and he made the point, the worst call he can get is a client who says, hey man, hey, I'm excited. We just bought X service from Y firm. And he's like, why the heck aren't we, we're missing those. That's revs off of our tail. And CPAs are starting to have those conversations. Anyhow, sorry for the dive.
Here's an industry that I think is ripe for people to set themselves apart and do change a couple of key things and really stand out from all their brethren.
Yeah. And yes, and they are.
The only thing I would say is that Here's my humble prediction is that CPAs per se, as in terms of the function they provide, will probably disappear in the next 5 years. It's clear to me anyways that the PE firms are buying it, either buying a client base
Yeah,
and then moving into the advisory function, meaning the CFO, fractional CFO type of work that needs to be done. The actual tax work is going to disappear over time. It's going to be automated, like you say, George, with AI, commoditized also. So there won't be as much of a desire to come into it. But I would say much more than that, if there's any direction for lowering taxes or eventually getting rid of tax completely, as you see being pushed by the current administration, potentially future administrations, then what tax returns are they filling out if there's no taxes being charged? I mean,
I heard a guy way out on the edge. This guy's out on the edge. So I'll keep talking about a model in which that he is in a a bona fide conversation, but a model in which we pay our taxes by the fraction of the penny on a constant basis, and that there's a school of thought that is the way we should go as a people. I'm not, but your point's a very, very good one, Joseph.
Yeah, I'd just modify your comment, Joseph, just a little bit, and that is, I think the lower half of the attestation function and the tax function is a lot of compliance stuff. And yes, that can be modified, that can be automated and modified from where it is. The creativity at the upper half of that, I would say, and George, please comment on this, I'd say that's like saying lawyers are going to go away. Yes, the compliance part of law, writing a simple agreement, we already see what wills and trusts being generated online by answering a bunch of questions. I don't think that replaces somebody doing a really complex estate planning process with somebody that has to ask questions about what do you want and how does this work, and has to have an interaction with the client and saying, do you really want to give the principle of the trust to the kids, or are you really just interested in having the trust go on as a legacy trust and you're going to use the income of it? Those are people discussions and teasing out feelings at where people want to go. I think that aspect of the CPA profession and the legal profession and any other profession is going to remain. But there's a whole lot of automation down here of going through the tax code and cranking out returns for 80% of people that's going to get automated.
Yeah, Eric, you're totally right. But you're talking about, the advisory components that are not going to go away versus the transactional components, which is processing of data. And
but they're still in the tax preparation
environment. Yeah, but in a zero tax environment, what kind of tax prep is going to be needed?
Yeah,
that was my point.
Politically, just answer with a smile on my face. Politically, can we ever really get the tax? I mean, there's lots of easy answers that have been proposed in my lifetime of fixing the tax code, and none of them have happened because politically they couldn't get done.
Well, because there's too much money involved.
Yeah, and everybody has their finger in it, and they don't want their part to go away, right? But I hear your point, Joseph. I think there's a whole lot of that stuff that could go away by automation, and I agree with you. It would go away if we simplified the tax code. But I just don't think that'll happen.
Well, and at the end of the day, the point you're making, Eric, is the point we made early in this conversation, which is, and I think the four of us agree, that I'm not going to make a decision about the trust that's going to benefit without talking to a person. And I don't really give a flyer what the machine tells me. I want to talk to flesh and blood, someone who's been in the trenches for 30, 40 years, someone with some gray at their temple. Who's going to do that? By the way, yeah, I won't get into the gray at the temple. I just listen.
Eric and George,
my temples aren't showing much gray anymore.
I was going to say to you that what we can bring to the table is the ability to help our clients manage the transition, whichever way it's going, whether taxation disappears or doesn't disappear. It's the advisory component. Someone who's been through the trenches, over like you say, George, the last 10, 20, 30 years has seen a lot of business cycles, a lot of change, a lot of movement. That's where we provide the most value.
Yeah, for sure.
I can't help myself, but I was just in a conversation with a client of McKinsey. I think it was McKinsey, who hired someone with a lot of gray and then ended up interfacing with a 37-year-old, maybe the woman was younger, who they were not happy with the experience. Let's simply put it that way. And it was kind of a warning shot for anyone using an EOS implementer model, because after a while, it's like you're basically, what are we doing here? You're basically parroting back what I'm saying, taking and not being accountable to what we come with accountability, and we come wanting accountability to results, right?
Yeah.
We promise a client, listen, we've had a conversation and I understand where you want to go. And I understand when you and I agree where you are today. That is a very different. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I have the expertise. Guys, I have a meeting in 1 minute, so I got to scoot.
Love to hear more details about San Diego at some point.
It was cool. Private equity is challenge your assumptions. You might want to use AI to say, okay, I think private equity would, I assume what am I not seeing? That would be an interesting, they are getting smart.
I'll get Steve to write a prompt for me.
Including behaving like traditional investors. One firm, one of the fastest growing firms in the country, had a plan. They had a strategic, they have a vision, a mission, and a plan. And they went out and found a private equity partner who would invest in that, which is very different than, that.
Yeah.
Think about it. That's a traditional investment.
That's not just buying customer base. Yep.
No, it's fascinating. There's so much capital. It's going to find a home. All right. I got to scoot, guys. You're welcome to stay on.
Guys, take care. Have a
Is
great
that
week.
it? That's for the week.
Great.
Listen, thank you. Thank you.
Great
Joe,
conversation,
Steve,
guys.
Eric, fantastic. We'll talk soon. Have a great week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
This episode is brought to you by the Growth Drive Summit. Our theme this year is building a profitable advisory business. Join us in Charleston, South Carolina, October 6th, 7th, and 8th. Expand your network, learn new skills, and generally have a good time. This is a top-rated event. We're looking forward to seeing you there. Thank you.